And if we're living in the moment, then we're able to be creative in the moment. And that creativity gives us, even at a physiological level, it gives us an extra burst in our hormone system to feel good about what's going on.
That's exciting. That's a whole nother area about how, we've come to this because we've needed to for survival, right? I mean, when we were living in the Serengeti plain, we needed to be able to predict, and we needed to be able to assume that if this happens, this is going to happen. And we had physiological responses that helped us get there.
Right.
But now, and that was helpful, and we survived because of it, but now we don't have to be so solid about those assumptions and predictions and belief systems and so forth.
And think about what's happened with human beings in the past 100 years and how our physiological reactions haven't quite caught up with everything we're trying to deal with. Fortunately, our minds can alter our brains and our nervous system so that we're able to learn how to be adaptive and flexible.
So in your work, you've worked with individuals, you've worked with corporations, you've worked with small groups, large groups. You really had a lot of opportunity to experience. Are people able to change?
Indeed, of course, people can change if they're willing to. I'm working right now with a manufacturing plant that's closing down. About 300 employees in a relatively small town are faced with, what are we going to do? And it's really interesting to watch the people who are saying, okay, I have to think about what am I going to do next? Gee, I'm afraid to go to school, but let me work with those fears, as compared with other people who are just staying with either denial or anger.
It's interesting that you brought up the manufacturing plant example, because several years ago I was working with Anheuser-Busch, and they'd closed a plant in New England somewhere. And people, a year after the plant closed, people were still driving up to that gatehouse and putting resumes under the door. Under the gate door, like, it's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. You need to move on. Denial. It was just profound. I couldn't believe when they told me that example, but honestly, people just said, it was here yesterday, it's got to be here tomorrow. I've made plans based on this plant. So it can't be different. So anyway, we've talked about a variety of different things. I want to touch on two more things. One is that importance of support. The community, the support, and you talked about that being a key element to resistance.
And particularly for women, there's a new study showing that women in the face of stress tend to want to bond. And that's the hormone oxytocin that's functioning in our bodies a little more than in men's bodies. We're finding that if men can learn that same practice of having a support group, going out, maybe not shopping, but to play golf or whatever that might be, that there's a production of a hormone in our bodies. Many years ago, there was a study at Harvard studying a group of nurses indicating that having at least one really close friend was at least, if not more important, in lowering blood pressure and cholesterol levels than diet and exercise combined.
Oh, well,
Isn't that amazing?
Testimony to our friendships as women.
Yes, that's right.
And then finally, I don't think we can talk about adapting to change without talking about the importance of humor. It seems like we've got to have a sense of humor. We can't take things so seriously. Is that what the research shows? Well,
I don't know a lot about the research, but what I know just from a psychological point of view is that humor lets us take a different perspective. It lets us get out of ourselves, look at the situation from another point of view, and in doing that, we really can take that lighthearted perspective that's saying, oh well, looking at what's this going to look like 15 years from now? What will we look back and laugh at and try to find some ways to laugh right now?
And linking back to your earlier comment about how we reframe our thoughts, humor just sort of short circuits that traditional pattern of making things worse. Humor sort of gets us out of that.
And I want to make the point, though, that that's real humor, that sometimes people laugh nervously. That's not humor.
Right.
when people make jokes about other people,
Right.
that's not humor
Yes.
either. It's being able to see ourselves in our situation and take a different look at it and see that it's really not as bad as we think it is, even when it's really,
It's
really bad.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You have given us so much information today, and I really appreciate your time. Belinda will be joining us later in the program to answer your phone and chat room questions.